So it's lesson 10 today in mobile and pervasive computing. And we want to look at integrating Google Map into our project. So we'll sort of do this in two parts. First, we're just going to add an activity with the Google Map. We're going to add it into our Restorator application. And at first, it's kind of going to be a standalone. We're just going to see how the map works and some of the controls and some of the configuration, what that looks like. Once we have the map working, the second part of the lesson, we'll want to integrate it into our Restorator app more tightly. So the idea is in our list of restaurants, we can click on a restaurant and grab the restaurant name and then be able to search for that location on Google Maps. So I can kind of show you a quick demo of roughly what this looks like. So if I go back to my list here of my restaurants, just go back. So if I go to my list and click on one, I'm going to add a little map icon here. I didn't bother in my test project, but we'll add a floating action button with a location pin. And when we click it, it will grab the name of the restaurant and also mention that it's in Barrie, and it will zoom right in to that particular location. Sorry, I may have to hit search. So when I search, it brings up the Google Map. Here, I didn't have it automatically running. Little tweak, we may be able to fix that. If I go back to my restaurant search, go back to my list, and I'll pick a different restaurant. It loads the restaurant activity. And then if I want to map the activity, I'm going to use an extra to pass the name. And if I click search, it now brings me to the map. So this is what we're going to do. There are some other things we could do. We probably don't have time in terms of like the Google Places API, etc. There's always more we can do. So if you want to open up your Restorator application, we can get started. I'm also just going to pull up, just follow up on our deployment from last week. We'll jump into my inbox. So I did get some notifications over the weekend from the Google Play Store telling me that the two deployments I made last week, my test app, which I put into production, and my open testing, I did get notifications around these. So we can see roughly how long it took. Let's see, when did Google get back to me? I think it was sometime last weekend. I hope I kept the emails. Okay. So here I got my content ratings. So this one took about 48 hours. I first submitted this F20 test on Thursday, November 21st. And I submitted it to production in the Play Store, and it took a couple of days before Google gave me a content rating. And once it did, my app got released. So here was my F20 test. So I took about 48 hours. So this is now in production. It's in the Play Store. And then the one we deployed in class, my Restorator, which I deployed on Friday in class, deployed it to open testing, and I got my content response also late, about a day and a half later, actually Sunday night. It gave me the rating, even though the email came in Saturday night. So it took somewhere between a day to 2 days. So my apps are in the Play Store now. if I go and look, so here's the Restorator. There is still an issue with Firebase. When I actually installed this, so I did install it on my device, but there's something not quite right with the Firebase connection with the SHA-1. So I'm going to have to, I'll have to sort that out and show the fix when I have a chance to do it. So it gives me a link to view it on Google Play. So my Restorator app is in open testing, so anybody can search for it and find it. So here's the Play listing, and it's noted as early access because it's not a full production release. I did an open testing release last week. So it says it's first released to open testing. So you can see the details from when I did my release and my deployment last week, and it shows it is already installed on my device because I installed it yesterday. So I am going to have to figure out the Firebase error. So I can log in, but I can't log in with Google and my data when I try to save it. I think I just have to change some rules in Firestore and maybe again update my SHA fingerprint in my release. So once I fix that, I'll send an announcement out, or else we can even go over it in class next week. I haven't had a chance to clean that up. So if you released your apps last week, you should have gotten similar notices from the Play Store. And your app will be available once Google generates a live rating notice. So I'm going to open up my Restorator app now. Yeah, I guess, that's odd. If you haven't received anything a week later, I'm not sure why that would be. You may want to check in the console if it's telling you that there's anything else you need to do in terms of your app. So are there anything on the checklist that is showing? You may need to look. So I've got my test track here with open testing. So in the dashboard, see if there's any indicator of checklist items you haven't completed. So I've got my Restorator. I'm going to launch it. So I've also put a tutorial link for today up on Blackboard. The first part of our lesson, we're largely going to follow what's in the tutorial. And then after, we're going to modify it so that it integrates with the restaurant listings in our current app. So to start, our map is going to kind of be a standalone component. We'll get the map working, and then we'll modify the rest of our application to integrate with it. So I'm just going to log in. I think I might need to cold boot my device. It kind of got stuck when I was playing around, so I'm going to cold boot my Nexus 5 because it doesn't really want to load. So while that's loading, we can pull up . So inside of lesson 10, we can have a look at the tutorial. We're going to sort of follow what's here. Got it open, actually. So the tutorial's a couple years old, but originally, but they have updated it. Okay, this is actually a great site, great resource site for Android development. So it allows us to generate a Google map. We can display and customize individual location markers on the map. And we can also search for places, which is what we're going to want to do eventually. We're going to want to be able to search for one of the restaurants in our Firestore database and be able to generate a map. So our first step, we're largely going to go through this. So this is a good reference. And then we'll modify it and integrate it with the rest of our app. So you may want to open this tutorial link. May be somewhat useful. Okay, my device is booted. I should be able to run the app now on my phone. So when we add Google Maps, we're going to need a couple dependencies. We're going to need to access Google Play Service dependency for maps, and we're also going to need to access a Google Play dependency for the location services. The nice thing is Android Studio, when we add a map, or if we build a map activity, it's going to automatically add a lot of these dependencies and also prompt us to go and set up a Google API key that we'll need in order to be able to use the maps. So I'm going to log in. Actually, I think I can sign in with Google here. So we'll load our list of restaurants. And I can click on one. And it takes me here and shows comments. I can go back to the list. Maybe I haven't coded my button there. I'll just click back. And I can load my profile. We worked on this with our scrolling and our navigation last week. So first we want to add a Google Maps activity to this. And for starters, once we add it, we're going to make that the startup activity just temporarily. So every time we run our app, the map will load and we can play around with it. Once the map is working, we want to integrate it in with our restaurant listings. We'll put sign up back as the launcher activity, and we'll add a floating action button to load the map. But this will save us from having to sign in every time just to try out the Google map. So I'll close up some of the stuff we don't need. I don't really need my main activity and our demands and our profile. So I'm going to click on File and New. And I'm going to come all the way down to Google. And what I want here is a new Google Maps activity. So let's go ahead and add one of these. And it recommends a default name of Maps activity. This is fine. So I'll just accept all of the options here. It's going to create a blank activity that basically the screen is filled with a Google map. Although we're going to add a little space above it in the second part of our class. When we load the map, rather than it fill the entire window, we'll give it a margin so that we can put a search search box and button above it. So I'll click Finish. And it's going to add the dependencies we need to build.gradle. So in build.gradle, we now have place services maps here. I'm not sure if we'll need it, but just to be safe, we also should add a reference to the place services location. So it'll be com.google.android, basically exactly the same as above. GMS, place services location, and the latest is 1710. So I'll just throw this dependency in the chat. So let's add that to the build.gradle file. And then we're going to get prompted to sync. So I'll click Sync Now in my little info bar at the top. So we get our maps activity, which actually has some working code on it. We also get an XML resource that's here in the resource values folder, and it's called Google Maps API.xml. And it's got some prompts here. Before we run our app, we need a Google Maps API key. And it wants us to store this key right here on line 23 of this file. So it says to get a Google Maps API key, follow the key, follow the directions, and press create at the end. So I'm going to copy that key. And I'm going to go to the Google Play, I'm going to paste that in. To Chrome, where I'm logged in with my Google account. And this is going to prompt us to generate an API key that we can use with Google Maps. So I need to create a new project here, and then I'll click Continue. So now it's enabled my API and project has been created. Maps SDK for Android is enabled. Now you'll need to create an API key in order to call the API. So I'll click Create. And it's going to generate an API key for Android that starts with AI. And I can just click Copy here. And this value I now have to paste into that XML file in Android Studio. So here on line 23, my string name is Google Maps key. I'm going to replace your key here with the key I just created in the Google Developer Console. So the documentation is really good here. It says, once you have your key, it starts with AIZA, replace it here. So we have this maps activity, but right now there's no way to load it. So to get it to load, I want to go to Android manifest.xml, and I want to change the launcher activity to our maps activity. So when we first run it, all we're going to get is the Google map. So open up Android Manifest. You can see it copies, it creates this metadata tag, which has our Android Geo API key. So it's reading from that resource file. Now notice also the API key is linked to the encryption key used to sign our bundle. So we'll have to modify this if we're going to publish to the store. I'm not going to worry about that for right now. So right now in our sign-in activity, we have this intent filter that makes the sign-in the launcher and the main activity. So I'm going to cut that from here. And I'm going to move that intent to our maps activity. So now when we load the app, instead of it loading our sign-in activity, it'll just load our Google Map activity instead. And now I'll run the app, and we should get a Google Map. So Android Studio actually takes care of most of what we need to do here. And we can actually have a look while this builds. What does that template actually do? So here's activity maps. It gives us a map. So the width and height are matching parents. So this is using a fragment. It's not a full activity. It's like a partial, but it's filling the whole activity right now. So the ID is map. And in the Kotlin code, what happens? We're initializing the map fragment, calling getMap. And our activity, rather than just inheriting from app-compat activity, it also inherits this map ready callback, which manipulates the map once it's available. And for some reason, Google decided when you use this template, it was going to give us a map and zoom into Sydney, Australia. So when I load my activity, I thought I did, but so our map activity loads, it renders a Google map, and it places a marker here, which I can click. And when I click, I get this title, Marker in Sydney. So without us really doing anything, we have a functioning map. The only thing we had to do was go ahead and generate that Google API key and include it in our resource file. So there are a few other things we could do with this. Maybe we don't want a map loading for Sydney, Australia. Maybe we want our map, to load for some other place. We also, right now, this map, you can't zoom in or out. So we want to modify it so we can also zoom. So we can go ahead and do a few of these things. So let's make a few changes in the map activity. Okay, so the first thing we can do is we change the latitude and longitude. I'm going to change this variable. We'll say val start location. So I'm going to change the variable here so it's not called Sydney. I also have the latitude and longitude for Barrie. So let's use those instead. I'm going to put them in the chat. So instead of the latitude and longitude for Sydney, let's make it so that our map actually loads to Barrie. We also want to enable zoom. So right now we can load the map. So we can move the map. Actually, I can't even move it. So let's set a few other settings here. Actually, you know what? I'll just run it as it is first and make sure that it loads Barrie. And once it loads Barrie, we can also enable zooming. So once our app reloads, it should show us North America instead. Right, which it does. I can click, gives me my title, but we still can't zoom. So let's enable the zoom. So our map has a UI settings property, and in there, it's got an is zoom controls enabled. By default, it's set to false. So let's toggle that to true in our on map ready method. So I'll restart my app, and this time not only should it default to Barrie, but we should be able to zoom in. So now I've got zoom controls. And we can zoom right in. And it basically takes us right downtown to Dunlop Street. Not quite, I guess a little bit west. So we'll want to enable the zooming. Are there any questions or any problems so far? That's interesting, Lynn. So it doesn't show the map, but it does show Google. Lynn, try in a different emulator if you have one. I'm curious. So if you're running it on a phone, try it on the tablet, and also make sure that you're not being prompted to sync in build.gradle. So after we added the activity and that template added the play services maps dependency, there'd be sync now appearing at the top of build.gradle. So make sure you click sync now. Is the process of zooming on the images is different, right? Okay. Try a different emulator, Lynn, and see what happens. Me, Sam, can you clarify your question? I'm not sure I fully understand what you're asking. Well, that's why if you enable the zoom, you should just be able to, you can click the buttons with your mouse. So this line of code that I just added, that enables those zoom controls. So you want to add this is zoom control enabled. That then gives you the zoom in, zoom out. By default, these are disabled. So it is very hard. The other way you can zoom in or out is here. No, actually that doesn't work. I take that back. Sorry. I think I'll go into settings. Okay, interesting. I'm just thinking about what the issue might be there, Lynn. So when you go into the map, okay, you know what, Lynn? Actually, let's check in your logcat. Check for any errors. I wonder if maybe there was an error with the API key that it can't render the map properly. Okay, so it didn't work on a pixel. Interesting. And Lynn, what emulators have you tried? Yeah, I've tried two Nexus emulators. I've used a tablet and I've used a Nexus phone. I haven't tried on a Pixel. I think I have a Pixel emulator, so maybe I will try it and see if I get the same result. Okay, you've tried them both. I'm going to try my Pixel. So check in you can filter the logcat for errors and see if there's an error. You can also validate to ensure that the API key, the full key, is pasted properly in Google Maps API.xml. So I'm going to try it in my Pixel. We'll see how it runs. Check your API key, check your logcat. We know it's not an emulator issue if you've used both Nexus and Pixel. That did not run on my Pixel. Unsupported class loader. That doesn't tell us very much, does it? We may have to do a little Google searching based on that stack trace. It's not very descriptive. It's talking about app compat, but Google certificates not found. Selected remote version. So we may have to search that error. Selected remote version, then you may have to check that. Selected remote version of Google certificates. We'll have to look online. I haven't seen that error before, so I don't have an immediate fix. I think it's going to take a little research. I'm going to try on my Pixel one last time. So are other people in the class able to load their map properly? Is Lynn the only one whose map won't load? So you're getting an error or just no map? And you've added the API key from the Google console? Okay, Lalit, maybe check your logcat as well, and let's see if you've got similar errors to Lynn. That might give us a clue. So this is my last attempt to load this on the Pixel just so I can see what happens. But I don't think this device is going to load. It's taking too long. It's already crashed once. Failed. Okay, so that's, I think, similar. Lynn had the same error. So let's go and look at that for a moment. Although I don't know, that should be causing. So for Firebase auth compat, Android Studio now seems to be, yeah. I'm going to stop trying to run it on the Pixel. It's just not working for me. It's just hanging my Android Studio, so I'm not going to be able to use that to test. So I'm using the BOM26 and Firebase auth KTX. Is your build.gradle similar or different when it comes to the Firebase auth? And it looks like that error has related to a Firebase dependency. Okay. Similar. Okay, well, I may have to look at yours both a little bit later. I do want to help, but I do need to move forward as well, as I can't quite hold up everybody. But I can maybe look in a bit and we can see. You may have to search for the errors you're finding in the logcat for a fix. I don't have an immediate fix right off the top of my head. I would have to look as well. So what I want to do now is I want to modify my maps activity so that rather than my map fill the entire activity, I want to add an edit text and a search button above it. Hope if I can find it now. So I'm going to make a few changes in the XML of activity maps. We're going to add a text view and a button, and we're going to change this a little bit too. So on our fragment, I'm going to add a top margin. So that'll move our button down. We'll set margin top equal to, I'll just set it to 200. I'm just going to hard code it for now. And I'll also set the align parent bottom to true. So the bottom of our fragment will be the bottom of the parent window. And our align parent start will be true. So that'll really the same thing as a constraint left to left of parents, really the same. So I've added these three properties to the fragment. I'll put them in the chat. And then I'm going to create an edit text and a button. For our edit text, we'll make the edit text as wide as the parent. Oh, we've got multiple root tags. Okay, what are we going to do here? Bear with me for a second. We just need to clean this up a little bit. Oh, we don't have a constraint layout here, so I'm going to add a constraint layout. And then I can take out those tags. So we'll create it with a constraint layout. Our layout height. We'll wrap the content. We'll give it an ID. I'll put all this up on Pastebin so you can check it. I'll call it address edit text. Our start and end will be to the parent. Our top will also be the top of the parent. And we'll give it a little margin at the top. We've already got a dimension for this. So we'll have an edit text that appears above the fragment. I could actually probably even put this first. So we'll have our edit text and then our map fragment. I'm just going to have a look at this. I want to add my button. I'll put the whole thing up on paste bin in a moment. So we've got an edit text up here and then our map down here. And underneath our edit text, I want a button. Our ID will be search button. We'll horizontally align it in the middle. And we'll set our top to the bottom of our edit text. And our button can just say search. Yes, I should use a string resource. I'm just going to skip that for now. I'm going to be a bit lazy today. I'm just going to run the activity and make sure it looks proper, and then I'll put all of this up on paste bin for you to compare. So we're converting the fragment, which took up the entire XML layout. We've now embedded it inside. Oops, I don't want a pixel 3. Go back to my Nexus 5. So we have inside our constraint layout an edit text, a button, and a fragment stacked vertically. Edit text at the top, button below, and then our map fragment below that. Our margin top of 200 probably bigger than it needs to be. We probably don't have to put the map that far below our search button. So I just want this to load. I'll put it up on paste bin and then we will take a break. So here's our map now. We can zoom in and out. I have a text box where I can search. My search button doesn't work yet. So the next thing we'll do when we come back after we take a break is we'll write a click handler on that search button, a click listener. So our map will take the address and then load that location. So I'm going to put, actually what I'll do, I'll just push this, I'll put this on paste bin and I will push to GitHub as well. And we are going to take a 10-minute break. I'm going to encourage everyone to get out of your chairs, go stretch your legs, get away from your computer for a few minutes. And I am going to do the same. I'll just put this up. So here's the link in the chat. I'm going to stop the recording and push to GitHub. We'll resume at 1:10.